Donnie, how are you today?
Amazing, fantastic, wonderful, and beautiful, but only getting better from here.
That is such an American answer. If I said that to somebody in the UK, they'd say good or thank you for asking. I'm going to note that. I love that answer. That's really fantastic. So we now know that we're dealing with an American, right? And I want to talk to you about how you got into what you're doing now, because your background's interesting. You've come from the Marines, you're a Marine Corps veteran. And now you are a businessman and your expertise is in business sales, business development, business growth. How'd you go from one to the other?
It's fascinating is I grew up in a very blue collar family. And, in my family, we were just raised, you went and got a job and you work for other people. And I didn't even know I could start a business and do my own thing until I was 40 years old. And my last career was with an organization called Sandler Training. And supposedly I became one of the top sales trainers in the US. I'm not really sure what that means, other than I'm really good at flapping my gums in front of a room. And Sandler's a franchise setup. And, I all the way up until Sandler, until I started my own company, I was a straight commission sales guy for 20 years. And that's what I knew. It's with my background when I grew up. So when I went to work for Sandler, it was a nice, cool transition to go from sales guy ultimately to sales trainer. But with Sandler being a franchise setup, in my franchise, I picked up business partner. And I really thought that sales training was going to be my end all be all. And that's what I was going to retire as. But during a fateful dinner with my then business partner, he said something that forever changed my life. And what he said to me was, Donnie, thank God you're my retirement plan. And he said it out of love. He truly did. I took it out of love. I love working for the guy. It's just a crappy choice of words. And long story short, 15 days later from that moment, I jumped out and launched my own company, leaving corporate America behind, if you will, and embracing my brand. And through a series of major mishaps and screw ups, I almost lost everything, including my farm, and found podcasting, turned a bunch of things around, learned business. And now I run three companies, have two of the top podcasts in the world, five best-selling books, and a partridge in a pear tree.
Wowzers. I think we've all been there where we've sort of lost everything and started again, but to turn it round in that way is fantastic. Now, there was a little if people listening carefully, there was a little word that you used there, which we probably wouldn't use in the UK, which is a little bit naughty. We got away with it, but you're also known. You, as you Americans say, you
Oh, I didn't even
cuss.
catch it. I
You
did
cuss. No, you didn't catch it.
it.
So you cuss and you swear. It's sort of the Gary V tribe, I suppose, because he likes to swear a lot too. Is that something? Is that something that's come from your background? Is that something that's? I can't imagine a blue collar family would be. Did they cuss and
Yeah,
swear?
we're pretty rough around the edges overall. But it was fascinating for me, going blue collar, then the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps, every other word is some sort of profanity. And then, I'm moving into the corporate world where I walk the line. And I think for me, because, you have to act a certain way, be a certain way, dress a certain way, especially if you want to climb any sort of corporate ladder. I was constantly showing up as two people in life because at heart, I'm a blue collar kid. In the corporate world, a blue collar kid's not going to make it because a blue collar kid's going to act a certain way, carry themselves a certain way. So it was actually a fateful speech down in Florida that I gave that allowed me to completely show up as myself. And I was about a year and a half into running my company. And I got invited to do a keynote down in Florida for a podcasters convention. And there's about 400 people in a room. It was a nice audience. And right before I went on stage, the gentleman who brought me down grabs me by the arm. Now, I'm a Marine. I don't like being freaking grabbed by anybody. And so he had me on my edge just for a second because he grabbed me pretty forcefully. And he goes, "Hey, I need a favor before you go on stage." And I said, "Okay, what's that favor?" He goes, "Don't go full Donnie." And I said, "What does that mean?" And he says, "I'm afraid you're going to show me up." Now, I got to tell you, at that point, I'm still wearing slacks. I'm in button downs, no ball caps, no t-shirts. I'm not using hardly any profanities out there. But in that moment, I yanked my arm out of his and I walked out on stage and I said, "Where the heck are my bleeps and bleeps?" using some very vulgar profanity. And 75% of the audience goes bananas, right? And they're screaming and hollering out of their seat. And I went, "Holy crap, there's my people." And what I realized is for 20 years of my life, I was putting on a mask and being somebody that I wasn't. So when I made that move, it was that point on, it's been ball caps, t-shirts, talking like I talk and carrying myself like I talk. No, I mean, I catch a lot of flack from the corporate folks, especially the older the generations, the more flack I catch. And I laugh because my response is always, well, thanks for proving that you're just not my people and the people I'm trying to talk to, because the people that I talk to and help and grow, using some explicits, using some swear words and the like, puts a cool emphasis and lets them know, hey, this is a world where you're allowed to show up as you. You're allowed to be yourself. And it's done very, very, very well for our brand and our businesses overall.
And I think you're right. You need to speak to your audience in the way that you can relate to them too, and that works. It doesn't work for me because it's not something that. Because actually, let me tell you, I was brought up in a very strict Italian household, and when I first used my first swear word, which I learned at school, I remembered being slapped round the head by my father. And when we used to go for driving lessons, and obviously I was older at that time, and if I made a mistake, I would swear, and he would hit me. So I got into the habit that every time I swore, I just felt this hand on my head. So I thought, I'm not
Right.
going to, and so you stop, and I've never sworn in front of them since.
Well,
So
don't
yeah,
forget
it's
that
a
if my grandmother were to walk in any room, you wouldn't hear a peep come out of my mouth or a
yeah,
fetish. Very, very,
yeah.
very proper.
It's
Um,
interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. So you mentioned speaking. So tell me, because obviously most of our audience here are speakers. Is speaking part of your business and part
yeah,
of, yeah.
absolutely. I get brought in a lot to speak on sales and business development is probably the biggest thing. But as my brand continued, and when I first started business, because of the success of the podcast, I was speaking on podcasting a lot. And now I'm getting brought in more to do more of the mindset shift around building a business, because you mentioned the name Gary Vee, and nothing against Gary, but Gary's one of those guys that makes people feel like starting or building a business is going to be the easiest thing in the world. He's like, everybody should be an entrepreneur, and there's a lot of people like that. And where I found my success on stage is speaking directly to the hard side of building a business and the things that go with it. Because when I tell people I almost lost everything, they lean into it because they realize I'm not doing the sunshine and rainbow side of things. So last year I probably did 25 stages. This year I've done 10 so far, and I've got 12 or 13 before the end of the year. 90% of them are paid stages.
Excellent. Really excellent. Great. So tell me about your business. So you've got your podcasts. What else do you offer in your business? You've got speaking, you've got podcasting. What are the other services?
Yeah. So by kind of a happenstance, we launched networking groups. Networking was not something that I wanted to be a part of, because most people who teach networking or get on stage and teach networking are just broke people that don't know how to sell. And I did not want to be roped in that category. So in April of 20, I had rented out the Hearst Convention Center here in Fort Worth, Texas, and we were doing the inaugural Bad A Business Summit, which is my business summit, where we bring speakers in from around the world in front of a large audience. And when we were getting ready to host the summit, we were told if anybody shows up for our event, they'll arrest everybody on site because of COVID. And it was just that time frame. COVID had just become a thing, and we were right on the cusp of, do we postpone? What do we do? And so instantly, at that point, our company had been 2 years in business, 2.5 years in business. And so we were going to be fine because we were online, but I knew how hard it was to build an online business. So that night, I had an epiphany that we should launch networking groups. And I really didn't want to do it until I was talking to my wife that morning over breakfast. And I said, babe, I'm going to launch networking groups, but I don't want to do it. I don't want to be associated with networking. And she looked at me and she goes, you're an idiot, right? I'm like, why am I an idiot? She goes, why don't you become the guy that changes how the world networks and fix everything that people hate about networking? And I went, crap. So 7 days later, we launched our first networking group, and we've now grown to 55 chapters across the US, 3 in Canada. We're getting ready to open up in Belfast, Ireland, London, Spain, India, and I think Singapore
Oh,
as
let me
we
know about
continue.
London when you open London, because
I
that's not too far
absolutely
from
will.
me. Yeah, that's really cool. What an intelligent wife. You see, behind every successful man is a very clever woman.
I will tell you, and everybody's asking me to write the book, so it's in works because there's a lot of things my wife said. But so I have a book coming out That's the crap my wife told me that saved my life.
Yeah.
And it's a series of different things. Now, I use a stronger word in my title just because I talk the way I talk.
Yes. Okay. And thank you for not using that word. I
You're welcome.
appreciate that. I appreciate that. So why do you think that most people fail at business? Is it because they've bought into this idea that it's easy and they don't realize that there will be hurdles? Is that what it is?
No, I think most people have never really given life a go. And what I mean by that, they've always done enough to survive, whether it's corporate America, and they've always kind of gotten to a point in life where they received some gentle promotions, but they were never stacked up against it. And what happens to most people when they launch a business is they'll do this thing like, okay, I'm going to come out as a coach or a consultant. So they start coming out as a coach consultant. They're like, oh crap, I don't know how to sell. No, I don't know how to talk to people. So I don't know how to bring people on. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start a podcast because a podcast is going to help me find clients. So they launch a podcast and then they go, well, crud, now I got to come up with all this content, all these things. It's going to be so hard. Then you got to edit, produce. You know what? Podcast's too hard. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a YouTube channel. I think a YouTube channel is going to be great. So then they launch a YouTube channel and then they go, oh my goodness, I got to come up with all this content. I got to edit. I got to go put it every day. They go, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do a blog. Let me do a blog. I think a blog is going to be the answer. And then they started a blog and then they realized it's going to be hard. Then they're like, you know what? I'm going to write a book because a book's going to be the answer. And what happens is every time they get to the moment where learning's going to happen and they may break through, they go back and they start something else. And what people don't understand is most business success comes from that moment when most people would logically throw in the towel. The successful people took one more step forward and started learning from their screw ups, applying what they're learning. And that's the moment they start to evolve. But when most people get to that place where, man, this is so hard building a business, they're like, you know what, I'll just go back and get a job. Or they start blaming their lifestyle. Well, I've got kids and a house and a mortgage and cars and this, that, and the other. I can't afford to not make money, when that's probably the exact thing they needed to do to learn how to progress forward. And then it's a series of steps from there of things they need to do. But the biggest step is when you get to that moment of throwing in the towel, is to take one step further, but start applying the things that you're actually screwing up. What are you learning in that moment? Changing one thing, trying it again and getting better. And it's screwing up or failing on purpose to learn and move forward. It's just people aren't wired to get to a place where they're stacked up against it and keep pushing because they've never done it anywhere in their life. And now they're trying to do it also while facing all the financial challenges. It's the most difficult thing in the world. I mean, I spent 20 years as a straight commission sales guy, 4 years in the Marine Corps, and building a business is the toughest thing I've ever done.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I've been on commission only as well, and I've built businesses. I completely get it. It really is. And if you've got a family to support as well, I think it's even harder
The
because
mental game.
Yeah, that's really tough. Fantastic. Thank you. I like that. So tell me, you've touched on sales, and it's one of the areas you talk about. People don't like selling, do they? Why don't they like selling? I think it's great.
Because they have a misconception of what sales is. When people think of selling, they think of the over the top, hard closing, take advantage of people, coercing, convincing. Sales in its ultimate sense is nothing more than a conversation between two people that happens to have an outcome. And here's the thing, nobody actually has a sales problem. Sales is actually the final portion where you get to a yes or no in a conversation. And 90% of people will tell you if they can just get in front of the right person, they'll have an amazing and beautiful conversation. So it's not sales people struggle with. It's actually business development and prospecting that they hate and struggle with. It's because that's the things that causes them to go out and put themselves out front and meet people, have conversations that will allow them to get into those sales conversations. But people won't do the things because that's where the real work is. And I tell people all online, there's only 3 business development activities you need to do at any given moment. The first one, we call it warm conversations. And warm conversations, that's your networking, that's your, going to after hour events, that's going to conferences and trade shows, any place you can get Zoom to Zoom or face to face with people and meet new people. The second one is cold outreach. And cold outreach is just like that. It's cold calling, cold email, DMing on LinkedIn, direct mail, door to door, anything where you go from people don't know you to cold introduction. And then the third one is passive marketing or hand raising. This is where you're putting out something where people can raise their hand and say, I'm interested. So it's your social media, it's getting on stages, it's getting on podcasts, blog writing. And as long as you understand that there's these three major activities, if you do one in each of these categories, just one warm, one cold, and one passive or hand raising, and you do them consistently, you're going to find and start finding success and start getting yourself into more conversations. But people were like, oh, I can do the warm because that's all the networking. That's all the fun stuff. I can do the passive because that's putting out social media and, that's easy stuff. But when you tell them they have to do a cold activity, that's where they get hung up because, but your best salespeople in the world are truly the people that are actually the best in business development. They can get to those conversations. So do one of those three or do one in each one of those three categories, and you'll start finding sales success.
I love that. So you've got your warm connections, your networking, you've got your cold outreach, and you've got your passive marketing, your hand raising. I like being called hand raising. I like that. You mentioned networking. You mentioned it already a couple of times. Give us some tips on how to network smarter, seeing as you've changed the way people network. Are you willing to share a few tips with us?
For sure. Number one, quit asking for referrals. And people don't get this, but for years we were taught referrals. Referrals tend to lead to a one transaction deal. And what happens is most time the people you're out networking, having conversations with, they very rarely actually see the end user you need to get to. Like if you're selling into a Fortune 500 company, most of the people your network aren't going to have the contacts inside those Fortune 500 companies. So what we tell everybody is quit asking for referrals, quit talking about referrals, which is funny because one of my books is actually called Endless Stream of Referrals. But, quit talking about referrals and focus more on synergy introductions. Like specifically, who has the client base you need to work with? And people don't wrap their head around it, but I'll use my brother as an example. My brother runs a background screening drug testing company. And so I very rarely would ever be in a conversation with another CEO that said, I need more background checks or I need more drug screenings. I'm just not going to find myself in those conversations. But my brother knows very specifically that if he can get into HR consultants that are already in having these cool conversations, that it is a gold mine for him. So he never tells people, I need to look for people who are looking for, background checks and drug screenings. He always tells people, I need to look for HR consultants. I need business consultants. And it's not a referral, it's an introduction to that person. So hopefully they can figure out some collaborative synergy back and forth and open up a lot of doors. An introduction may lead to thousands of referrals and new relationships and new business development, but people, because they were taught for years, this kind of giver's gain, you got to give referrals mentality. People are used to that. If I don't get referrals, if I'm not giving referrals, I'm not showing up. When introductions have made this world go around for years, we're just completely bringing it to the forefront and say, look, quit trying to, you're not supposed to be somebody else's salesperson, but you can introduce people to a lot of the right people so they can get into a lot of the right conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Absolutely. Really great. I think I've actually got your book. I think I've read it. When you read, because I hadn't connected the two, and then you made told me the title. I thought, I've got that book. So I'll put it in the bin, shall I? Because we're doing introductions now, not referrals. I won't.
No,
So there's a question I'm scared to ask you because I watched one of your podcasts and an introduction because you do a podcast. You've got a partner on your podcast,
Yep.
and your partner is really process
Very
obsessed,
much so.
right? Kevin,
Yep.
right? He's
Yep.
process. Yeah. Are you not a fan of processes?
Not at all. I really struggle with them. But now let me put a caveat on that. Without processes, without systems, you cannot scale and grow a business, period. And so for me, processes and systems have always felt like rules, and I'm not just your rule following type of guy. And so it's something that I've always struggled with. So I have to, well, one, finding Kevin, who's the COO and business partner, was a godsend, I swear, for the company, because he's so process and operationally focused. So, what most people don't understand is you as an individual is not scalable. Like, you yourself are not a scalable thing. So, without process and systems, you can't scale a business. You can't grow a business, because if only you can do it, it's not scalable. So when Kevin came into the mix and we started adding a lot of processes and systems, it was an absolute game changer, because now we could pass off responsibilities and things to other people, which is one of the keys to growth as well, is getting other people to do things for you, because CEOs don't think in how, they think in who. And when you can start thinking in who, and you can actually set somebody else up for success because the systems and processes are in place, beautiful things happen. I still struggle to follow even my own processes. So I have to create micro processes to the process so I can get the whole process done and just break it down in smaller bite-sized pieces.
Actually, that's a really good tip if you're struggling with the process, to break it down in bite-sized, so you feel that you're moving forwards and it doesn't feel like such a big. It's like, who was it? I'm trying to remember now. Was it Charles Handy who said, talked about eating an elephant one
One
bite at a
bite at a
time?
time. I don't know
Was
if it
it
was Charles,
Charles?
but I
I'm
don't
not
know if
sure
it
if
was
it
Charles,
was.
but it's a great
But
phrase.
yeah, write in, send us a postcard. Let us know who it was. I know it was the elephant and the flea was Charles, wasn't it? So anyway, tell us who it was that said about eating an elephant one bite at a time. Um, so I have a final question for you. You've said that sometimes people have to risk it all to
Mm.
figure out life. Why is that the case? Surely you don't, do you? Really?
Well, I do, because most people, like I was, kind of walk through life and they have a sense of they're successful. I mean, up until I launched my company, I mean, people would have said that I was living a successful life. I mean, we had built our dream farm. I had a second house on the property for my mother-in-law. I mean, we were doing great things, but I had never actually chose the life I want to live. I always took what was in front of me. So every job, even the Marine Corps, every career choice I did, somebody offered me the job. I never went out and sought it out. And I think a lot of people are that way. They've just taken what's in front of them. So they've never found it within to actually go for it. Now, people can change, and people can potentially reach down, lace up their boots, and actually get after it and impact and change their life. But I truly believe most people have got to get to a spot where they run out of excuses. And here's what happened to me. When I got to that point of almost losing the entire business, the farm, and everything else, I realized there was nobody left to blame. It was my company. I couldn't blame marketing for bad marketing. I couldn't blame the economy. I couldn't blame, anything for why my business wasn't succeeding. I got to a point where I realized success was my fault. Failure was my fault. And when you get to that point, you're forced to look yourself in the mirror and decide, are you proud of the life you've lived up to this point? And I wasn't, because I realized that I never actually had gone for it. And I love J.K. Rowling's, quote that rock bottom's the foundation on which I built my life. And I think for a lot of people, that's where we got to get to, because that's the moment we actually make the choice to say, all right, I'm going to move forward. But most people, because they've tricked themselves in this false sense of success, have never actually figured out how to make a go for it, because there's never been a strong enough reason to push them forward. So when I tell people, in my case, I bet the farm, I literally did. And I think most people will have to, because they're going to have to get to a place where things are so damn scary, they'll actually move forward and give life a heck of a go. And then it's a driver. Every time you get stacked up against it, you can look back and go, yeah, I ain't going back that way. Like for me, it's like, I'm not going back to corporate America. I'm not going back to have to tell my wife we're going to almost lose everything, where she has to cash in her 401k and save the farm and things. I'm not going to allow that to happen. But had I not gotten to that position, I don't know if I would have ever actually found that fight, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. And I think we've all had our rock bottom. For some people, it's been a bigger fall
For sure.
than for
For
others,
sure.
and for others, for some it's sort of less. But yeah, we've all got these situations, and I always say, you know, when one door closes, a window opens
Yeah, right.
to another opportunity, and when you look back, you realize it's been something good. So I'm going to allow you now to advertise your book, because you've got a book.
I
Tell us what it's about, the new one that's
for
coming out,
sure.
and you've been very good. So avoid the bad language. See
I
if you can
will.
do
I
it.
will. I will. I will. Absolutely. So if you go to Amazon and you type in my name, Donnie Boivin, you'll see the latest book, red cover, white text. The last two words are to focus. So take it from the idea of I cuss, and it's from going from a complete chaos to focus. And I'll let you figure out what words fit in there. But the idea of the book is, as I was building a business, nobody was talking about the real side of business. Everybody was sunshine and rainbows and business freedom, and life can be great and life can be grand. And what I, realized was, out of complete happenstance, I started a Facebook group and I started talking, and I started because I wanted to get around other business owners, because I thought if I got around other business owners, I would hear their trials and tribulations. Mine wouldn't be so bad, right? I have this commonality. But when I launched this group, I started talking about my trials and tribulations, and people started asking me questions. I'm like, wait, no, I'm screwing everything up. You don't want to ask me questions. I don't know what I'm doing. And they kept asking questions. And what I realized is everybody was looking for the same answers, but they didn't know where to turn because everything was sunshine and rainbows. So I wrote the book to actually walk people through my story. So it's kind of half biography, half, business build book, where they're going to hear the tough conversations with my wife and about almost losing everything, but then teach the processes of what I've done to build our global brand and build the company to this point. And it's not meant to be a business plan. It's not meant to be a complete structure of how to build your business. It's meant to be a reference point for people to go back. Okay, I'm struggling with this area. How do I work on this? And how do I improve this? And how do I do this? And I'm the most proud book that I'm so glad that I wrote, because the feedback came back from a lot of people is, man, it feels like I'm just having a conversation with you as I'm reading the book, which was my hope and goal as I went through this. And, my teaching style is always, I'm going to share through my stories, and people have just gobbled it up. So if you're figuring out how to actually grow a business so you can scale, then this is the book for you. And it's outsold all four of my other books 10 times over combined. So we've had a lot of fun with it.
Fantastic. And I do agree with that message that business is not all sunshine and roses. It really isn't. So I'm glad you're sharing that message. Thank you so much for being a guest. I hope you've enjoyed yourself. I hope it wasn't too painful.
Oh, no, this was amazing. And guys, do me a favor. If you got any tips, tricks, any value out of this, do Maria a favor and share this episode or her podcast out with one person. I can tell you, being a fellow podcaster, that growing your audience is one of the toughest things in the world and reaching the people. So share this show, share her podcast out with one person. It's literally like you walked up and gave her a virtual hug every time you do it. She'll appreciate it.
I really will. Thank you so much. I was going to ask people to do that, but you've done it beautifully. Thank you so much.
You're very
Thank
welcome.
you, everybody, for listening. And until next time, I've been Maria Franzoni, and Donnie has been Donnie. Thank you very much. See you next time.